You are standing in the middle of your kitchen, holding an empty water glass, and you suddenly realize you have absolutely no idea why you walked into the room. You stare at the refrigerator, hoping it will jog your memory, but your mind is completely blank. Or perhaps you are at the grocery store, running into a neighbor you have known for 15 years, and as you go to say hello, their name simply vanishes from your brain. It is not on the tip of your tongue. It is just gone. A cold, heavy panic starts to spread in your chest. You smile, you fake your way through the conversation, and you hurry back to your car. You sit behind the steering wheel and think about your own parents or grandparents. You think about the slow, terrifying fade of dementia. You tell yourself that your time has finally come, that your brain is wearing out, and that this fog is just the unavoidable, tragic reality of getting older. I know exactly what that panic feels like because I lived with it quietly for the better part of a year. My name is Harold Bennett. I am 81 years old. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, but I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in a working-class neighborhood where folks did not complain about aging. My father worked his entire life in a manufacturing plant. When his body started to fail, and when his memory started to slip in his final years, he just accepted it as the natural breakdown of the machinery. He never asked why. He just assumed that a long life eventually demands the surrender of your mind. I spent my working years in community health education. My job was not to prescribe medicine, but to translate complicated medical jargon into plain English that folks like my father could actually use. I used metaphors from construction sites, from plumbing, and from the auto mechanic's garage to explain how the human body operated. I always believed that if you understood the machine, you could keep it running. But a few years ago, after my wife Margaret passed away, I started experiencing that exact same terrifying mental fog. I would walk out to my mailbox and forget if I had already checked it. I would sit down to pay my utility bill and find myself staring at the numbers, unable to focus. My thoughts felt like they were moving through thick, wet concrete. I was terrified. I was convinced I was developing early-stage dementia. I did not tell my children. I did not want them to look at me with that specific kind of pity. I started mentally preparing to give up my car keys and my independence. But my daughter Laura is a registered nurse up in Phoenix, and it is very hard to hide things from a woman who has spent decades observing the subtle changes in older adults. She came down for a weekend visit, and she watched me struggle to recall the name of a restaurant we had eaten at just a month prior. I gave her a weak smile and made a joke about my brain getting rusty. Laura did not laugh. She did not pat my hand and tell me it was just old age. Instead, she walked straight into my bathroom, opened the medicine cabinet, and brought my entire plastic pill organizer out to the kitchen table. She sat down across from me and told me we needed to talk about the electrical wiring inside my head. She got my son Daniel on the phone. Daniel is a physical therapist in Denver, and he has a brilliant mind for how the systems of the body interact. Together they explained a biological reality that the standard, rushed, 7-minute doctor appointment almost never covers. They told me that I was likely not developing dementia at all. They told me I was chemically sedating my own brain. Laura explained that the human brain relies on a vast, incredibly complex electrical network to form memories, hold focus, and process information. To keep that electricity flowing from one brain cell to the next, the body uses a specific chemical messenger called acetylcholine. Think of it like the spark plugs in a car engine. As long as the spark plugs are firing correctly, the engine runs smooth and the car accelerates when you press the gas. As we get older, our brain naturally produces a little less of that chemical spark. The engine is a bit older, so the spark is slightly weaker. That is normal. But Daniel explained that millions of older adults are taking common, everyday medications that actively block whatever spark is left. The medical term for these drugs is anticholinergic, but Daniel told me to just think of them as spark plug blockers. When you take these pills, they cross the barrier into your brain and throw a wet blanket over your memory centers. The engine starts to misfire. You get confused, you lose your words, and it looks exactly like dementia. But it is not a disease. It is a chemical brownout caused by the things sitting in your own medicine cabinet. The first culprit Laura found in my pill box was something I bought at the grocery store. It was a little pink pill. Diphenhydramine. Most people know it as an over-the-counter allergy pill or the main ingredient in those nighttime sleep aids. I'd been taking one every night because I was having trouble sleeping after Margaret died. I assumed that because I could buy it without a prescription, it was perfectly harmless. Laura explained that this little pink pill is one of the strongest spark plug blockers on the market. It sedates you by suppressing the central nervous system, but it also aggressively suppresses the memory-making chemical in the hippocampus, the part of the brain that records new information. By taking that pill every night, I was practically turning off the recorder in my brain. I was trying to get a good night's sleep, but I was waking up with a brain that could not hold a thought. I threw the bottle in the trash that afternoon, but over-the-counter sleep aids were just the beginning. Daniel explained that many prescription medications given to older adults do the exact same thing. If an older person goes to the doctor complaining of an overactive bladder, they are often prescribed a pill to control the muscle spasms. It stops the leaks, which is a relief. But that medication works by blocking the exact same chemical messenger. The pill does not know how to stay in the bladder. It travels up to the brain and starts shutting down the memory circuits. The patient stops going to the bathroom as often, but they start forgetting their grandchildren's birthdays. The same thing happens with older prescription pills used for chronic nerve pain. They dull the pain in the legs, but they also dull the entire cognitive engine. Then Laura picked up my daily heartburn medication. It was a standard acid blocker I had been taking for years so I could drink my morning coffee in peace. I asked her what my stomach had to do with my brain. Daniel explained that the brain is largely made of fat, and it requires a constant supply of specific nutrients to protect its wiring, primarily vitamin B12. Think of B12 like the high-quality synthetic oil that keeps the engine parts from grinding together. But your body cannot absorb vitamin B12 from your food without strong stomach acid. By taking a pill that completely shut down my stomach acid for years, I had inadvertently shut down my body's ability to absorb the oil my brain desperately needed. Without that oil, the protective coating on the nerves begins to fray. The signals misfire. You experience brain fog, memory gaps, and even numbness in your hands and feet. I was treating a little morning heartburn by starving my neurological system. But the most dangerous thing Laura and Daniel explained to me was a concept called polypharmacy. It is the invisible threat that almost no one talks about. If you take an allergy pill occasionally, your brain can usually handle it. If you take a stomach pill for a week, you will recover. But older adults rarely take just one pill. You go to a sleep specialist, and they give you a sedative to calm your nerves at night. You go to a gastroenterologist and they give you a heavy acid blocker. You go to a urologist and they give you a bladder control pill. You go to the pharmacy and buy the pink allergy pill for the sniffles. None of those doctors are looking at the entire circuit board. They are only looking at their specific switch. When you take all of those pills at the same time, the cumulative effect is absolutely devastating. It is exactly like plugging a refrigerator, a space heater, a microwave, and a heavy-duty power saw into the exact same wall outlet. Eventually, the load is too massive, the circuit breaker trips, and the entire house goes dark. Millions of older adults are walking around right now with a tripped circuit breaker in their brain. Their families think they are losing their minds to Alzheimer's disease. The doctors write it off as inevitable cognitive decline. But the truth is, their brains are just buried under a mountain of conflicting, sedating, spark-blocking chemicals. Once I understood the mechanics of what was happening, I refused to be a passive victim of a fragmented medical system. I did not stop taking my medications cold turkey. That can be incredibly dangerous, especially with prescriptions. Instead, I called my primary care doctor and scheduled a long, dedicated appointment. I brought every single pill, vitamin, and over-the-counter bottle I owned in a brown paper bag. I set them on the exam table, looked the doctor in the eye, and asked him to calculate the total anticholinergic load I was putting on my brain every day. I asked him if we could slowly taper off the heavy acid blockers. I asked if there was a non-sedating alternative for my allergies. I asked if we could do the hard work of finding the root causes of my discomfort, instead of just throwing another chemical blanket over the symptoms. It took several months of careful adjustments, I had to endure a little more heartburn while my stomach adjusted. I had to learn new sleep hygiene habits instead of relying on a pink pill to knock me out. But the results were nothing short of a resurrection. The heavy, wet concrete in my mind slowly began to dry and crumble away. I stopped walking into rooms and forgetting why I was there. My vocabulary returned. The sharp, clear focus that I thought I had lost forever to the calendar came back online. The spark plugs were firing again. The oil was back in the engine. I had not been suffering from dementia at all. I had simply been over-medicated by a system that prioritizes quick fixes over long-term mechanical health. After 60, you can no longer afford to blindly swallow everything you are handed without asking the hard questions. You have to be the general contractor of your own body. You cannot assume that because a pill is popular or because it is sold over the counter that it is safe for your aging neurology. If you are experiencing sudden brain fog, if you are losing your words, if you feel disconnected from the world around you, do not automatically surrender to the terror of dementia. Do not assume your mind is just wearing out. Go into your bathroom right now. Look at the bottles in your cabinet. Look for the sleep aids, the acid blockers, the bladder pills, the heavy pain relievers. Write them all down. Take that list to a doctor who is willing to look at the whole picture, not just a single symptom. Your mind is your most precious asset. It holds your history, your personality, and your connection to the people you love. Do not let it be quietly smothered by a handful of well-intentioned but dangerous habits. You have the right to ask questions, you have the right to demand a review of your medications, and you have the power to protect the wiring inside your own head. I am Harold Bennett. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.